Alright, what is going on, guys? EGM coming at you with a brand new video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my 2017 season preview for the Dallas Cowboys. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now let's rewind the clocks back to 2015. The Dallas Cowboys were looking to build off the momentum they had developed in the 2014 season after making the playoffs, losing in the divisional round to the Green Bay Packers in a game that was swirled in controversy. So going into the 2015 season, the Dallas Cowboys had high hopes. They really believed that year they were going to be able to make it to the Super Bowl, or at least had an opportunity to make it to the Super Bowl. But Tony Romo got injured. Tony Romo missed the majority of the 2015 season. They finished with one of the worst records in the NFL. And as a result of that, they ended up with the 4th overall pick in the 2016 NFL draft. Now with that pick, they selected Ezekiel Elliott. Later on in that draft, they selected Dak Prescott out of Mississippi State. And little did Cowboys fans know, more so Dak Prescott, that those two guys would be key contributors in the 2016 NFL season. Now again, Tony Romo was back. He was healthy. In a preseason game against the Seattle Seahawks, he got injured. So that means that Dak Prescott stepped into the starting role. And it was at that moment when Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and the rest of the Dallas Cowboys team took the NFL by storm. They finished first in the NFC East and first in the conference. So they were the number 1 seed going into the playoffs this past season, where they lost in the divisional round to the Green Bay Packers. Dak Prescott had a stellar season. He threw for 3,667 yards, 23 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I believe he had the best touchdown interception ratio. Ezekiel Elliott led the league in rushing, ran for over 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, just had put on a phenomenal rookie campaign. And I know this came as a shock to a lot of people, but Cole Beasley actually led the team in receiving yards. Cole Beasley caught 75 catches, caught over 830 yards, 5 touchdowns. Dez Bryant chipped in with 800 yards as well, 8 touchdowns. So this Cowboys offense was really efficient. It was very rare when you saw the Cowboys make any types of mistakes on the football field. They were actually ranked the 5th best offense in terms of total yardage. So this Cowboys offense indeed was very productive. Now last year their defense was not too good. They were ranked first when it came to rush defense, but their pass defense was horrid. They were actually ranked 26th in the entire league and ranked 14th overall in terms of total defense. But the good on offense really outweighed the bad on defense. Like I said, they were the number 1 seed in the NFC before losing in the divisional round to the Green Bay Packers. But I don't think Cowboys fans were too devastated that they didn't come away with a deep playoff run, because now they know they have a future franchise quarterback and already one of the best running backs in the league in Ezekiel Elliott. Dez Bryant is still around, and Jason Witten is still a very reliable option. So the Cowboys are set at offense coming into the 2017 season. Now this past April in the draft, they used their first 3 picks on defensive players. In the first round, they drafted defensive end Taco Charlton. In the second round, defensive back Chidobe Awuzie, and another defensive back in the 3rd round in Jordan Lewis out of Michigan. So the Cowboys are very aware that they need help on the defensive side of the football, particularly in the secondary. Now their pass rush, although plagued with injuries and suspensions, did a pretty dang good job last year. They were 13th in sacks, but their secondary was pretty bad. They ranked 27th in interceptions, did a really poor job of turning the ball over. So rightfully so, the Cowboys used the majority of their picks to amp up their defense. So now let's talk about their strengths and weaknesses going into this upcoming season. So let's start with the first obvious strength, this offensive line. This is, in my opinion, and I think in many other people's opinions, the best offensive line in football. Doug Free retired, Ronald Leary left in free agency, but they're going to move La'el Collins over to the right tackle spot. They brought in Jonathan Cooper to hopefully hold up the position at left guard. But beside what I just mentioned, the Cowboys still have 3 all-pro players on that offensive line in Zach Martin, Travis Frederick, and Tyron Smith. So that offensive line is still as great as it's ever been. Now another strength I have for this football team is at the running back position. Now, a few days ago, we got word that Ezekiel Elliott is indeed going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season. But the Cowboys have solid depth at that position. They have Darren McFadden, who just 2 years ago had an 1,000-yard season behind that Dallas Cowboys offensive line. They have Alfred Morris, who he himself is a former 1,000-plus yard rusher back in his day with the Washington Redskins. So I think they're going to be able to hold up pretty well in the absence of Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously not have the same impact, but they're guys with experience, and I think that behind that offensive line, it makes things a little bit easier for anyone that's carrying that ball behind that offensive line. Now let's talk about some of the weaknesses. Now, many of the weaknesses from last season are carrying over into this season. The secondary is still a big question mark, and I even want to say that this secondary got worse. They lost their 2 starting cornerbacks in Brandon Carr and Morris Claiborne. They did sign Nolan Carroll in free agency. They still have Anthony Brown, who's a pretty solid starter. But lack of depth is going to give the young cornerbacks like Jordan Lewis and Chidobe Awuzie opportunities to be able to make impact plays early. They also lost a solid starter and some key depth at the safety positions. Barry Church, who actually led the team in interceptions with 2 interceptions last season, signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars this past offseason. JJ Wilcox left as well. They still have Byron Jones and Jeff Heath. And Byron Jones is a player that I like a lot. I expect him to take a huge leap coming into this season. He's very versatile. He can play the safety position. He can play the cornerback position. And the secondary is going to need guys to step up and make key plays at critical moments, because this season they are going up against a lot of very competitive offenses. Now, another weakness that I think the Dallas Cowboys have would be at the wide receiver position. We know they have Dez Bryant. Cole Beasley shocked a lot of us and had a very productive year this past year. They drafted Ryan Switzer in the 4th round of this past NFL draft. But Ryan Switzer is very similar to Cole Beasley. He's a very small receiver. And because of their height, receivers like Cole Beasley and Ryan Switzer are limited to running short routes like slants, underneath routes, flats, and aren't much of a threat down the field. Now, they have Terrence Williams, who is decent at best. There are many times where Terrence Williams is inconsistent, so the Cowboys lack a second receiving option that can be a threat on a consistent basis right alongside with the healthy Dez Bryant. Now, these are just some of the strengths and weaknesses. So now let's get into what the Cowboys need to do to repeat the same success that they had last year. Now, this is going to come down to Dak Prescott. Now, last year, as I said earlier in the video, Dak Prescott is coming off a great rookie campaign, but he's going to have to repeat the same success that he had last year this year, especially in the absence of Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Ezekiel Elliott, because of the threat that he was coming out of the backfield, it took a lot of the pressure off Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott wasn't necessarily the focal point that other teams game planned for. A majority of the opposing teams game planned for Ezekiel Elliott. Now, throughout the first 6 games of the regular season while Ezekiel Elliott is suspended, we're going to see what Dak Prescott is made of. Is he really the franchise quarterback that the Cowboys think he is? Because we've seen great quarterbacks time and time again repeat their success without great run games. We've seen Tom Brady win Super Bowls without a run game. We've seen Aaron Rodgers. We all know how great he is, and he hasn't really had a run game. Drew Brees. The list goes on and on. So we're really going to see if Dak Prescott is the real deal. He has the best offensive line in football, so they're going to give him time. He just needs to make the throws. I know he has some accuracy issues when it comes to throwing the rock down the field, but if he stays calm, keeps cool, and goes through his progressions, I think the Dallas Cowboys offense should be alright. Another question I have about the Dallas Cowboys is their pass rush. Like I said, they just drafted Taco Charlton in the 1st round of this past draft. They have Demarcus Lawrence, who's coming back. Charles Tapper, who they drafted in the 4th round of the 2016 NFL draft. He's coming back after missing all of last year with a back injury. But this year they have a few more suspensions. David Irving, who had 4 sacks last year, is going to be suspended for the first 4 games. Randy Gregory is suspended for the entire year. So Dallas is definitely going to need to see some production from the younger guys, from Charles Tapper, Taco Charlton, and Demarcus Lawrence, who led the Dallas Cowboys in sacks with 8 sacks in 2015. And that was the only time that he's played a full NFL season since he's been drafted. So he's going to be the X factor on this Dallas Cowboys defense. Tyrone Crawford, who had 4.5 sacks last year. Malik Collins had 5 sacks. These guys are going to have to continue to keep up the production, as well as Benson Mayowa. They need to get after the quarterback, because when you have a secondary that is that bad, you need to get to the quarterback as soon as possible. You need to eliminate any time that the quarterback is going to have to capitalize on any mistakes that your secondary is going to make. And this coming season, the Dallas Cowboys secondary is going to make a lot of mistakes. So this pass rush needs to get after the quarterback early and often. Now, the last thing that I'm interested in seeing going into this season is the linebacker position. Sean Lee, we all know when he's healthy, he is one of the better linebackers in the National Football League. This past season, he led the team in tackles with 145 total tackles. So Sean Lee is undoubtedly very, very efficient. Now, what I'm looking at is Jalen Smith. In 2016, they took Jalen Smith in the 2nd round. It was a very risky pick, being that he was going to be out for the entire season last year, being that he injured his knee late in the college football season. In my book, he was a top 15 prospect. He was for sure going to go inside the top 15, possibly top 10. A very dynamic middle linebacker with good speed, pretty good tackler. And the Cowboys are getting him back this season, so they're looking for him to develop into the guy that they expect him to be. And if he comes back from this injury 100%, that middle linebacking core is going to be very, very scary. He plays anywhere near the expectations that we all have for him going into the draft. He's going to be a dang good middle linebacker, and it's going to help Sean Lee a lot. It's going to help that defensive core out big time. So now let's get into the record predictions. Initially, I had the Dallas Cowboys winning 11 games. They have a pretty tough schedule. They're going up against the likes of Green Bay, Denver, Arizona, Oakland. They obviously have tough divisional games against the New York Giants, against the Washington Redskins, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I did expect them to lose a few more games than they did last year, but this Ezekiel Elliott suspension does really change quite a bit, because I personally don't think that Dak Prescott is really ready to carry this kind of load. I do expect him to regress just a tad and come back down to earth. I do expect him to make a bit more mistakes than he did last year, but that's okay. Being without Ezekiel Elliott is going to be a learning experience for Dak Prescott, and he's going to be able to use this to improve upon his game. So with that being said, I do see the Cowboys losing 7 games this season, competing for a wild card spot. But like I said, this is all depending on the Ezekiel Elliott suspension. I know he's appealing. If the suspension gets lifted, then it's going to change things. I do think the Cowboys win 11 games. But being that he is currently suspended, I don't see them winning more than 9. So let's look at their schedule really quick. I think they lose opening game against the New York Giants. I think they lose against the Broncos. It makes them 0-2. They beat the Cardinals, they beat the Rams, they lose to Green Bay at home, they beat San Francisco, they beat Washington. That should be the game that Ezekiel Elliott returns. So I think they beat Washington at Washington, and they beat Kansas City. So I think that makes them 4-4 halfway through the season. And then they got Atlanta at Atlanta. I think they lose that game. I think they beat Philadelphia, they beat the Chargers, I think they beat the Redskins. Now in their second game against the New York Giants, last year they got swept by the Giants. They lost both games against the New York Giants. This season I don't think that happened. I think the Dallas Cowboys at full strength will beat New York over there. I think they lose to the Oakland Raiders. I think they do beat Seattle at home, and then I think they lose to the Philadelphia Eagles, leaving them with a record of 7-9. I think that happened. I think the Dallas Cowboys at full strength will beat New York over there. I think they lose to the Oakland Raiders. I think they do beat Seattle at home, and then I think they lose to the Philadelphia Eagles, leaving them with a record of 9-7. Now, if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more content.